Alright, that's enough. I've had it with these commercials. Every time my team is getting whooped, this just has to come on and taunt me. It has made me think, hasn't Burger King been in NASCAR before? The answer is yes. The primary competitor McDonald's has had a flourishing history as a sponsor in NASCAR, but in the past decade, it has become particularly shady. Today we will dive deep into the story of BK Racing, a somewhat short-lived NASCAR team. Before we begin, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Let's get into it. Burger King. Just another massive corporate food chain. The only time you'll ever see me step foot in one of these establishments is to use the restroom during a road trip, which is the absolute last resort. Even then, the whole place just never sits right with me. And those damn commercials, they just, well, you get the point. However, Burger King does have a history in NASCAR, but it is little to speak of when you're talking about surface level information. The only core memory of Burger King that likely resides with all NASCAR fans is Tony Stewart destroying Kyle Busch at Daytona in 2009. We find a more stable presence of Burger King in the NASCAR Cup Series with BK Racing, founded by Ron Devine and Wayne Press. BKR was formed out of the ruins of Red Bull Racing and a lower midfield team in TRG Motorsports. Red Bull Racing's departure came from their title sponsor's disappointment in their lackluster results. And in comes this dude named Ron Devine out of nowhere. I have just looked about everywhere to find even an inkling of this dude's background. All I know is this. Devine graduated from James Madison University in 1978 by studying management and marketing and has, quote-unquote, taken skills he learned as an undergraduate to assemble his dreams. Additionally, although I doubt he still is one, he was/is a Burger King franchise owner. Now, no one can just relinquish some cash and become a franchise owner. Being a fast food restaurant franchisee means, in the simplest of terms, you have some serious money. I'm talking about millions. Now, this is where I get suspicious. Just look at this interview.
Ron Devine, how are you, sir?
Good to meet you,
BK Racing.
Yep.
All right. So how long have you been involved in the racing industry?
So it's really my 6th year.
Okay.
Although 5 since we bought Red Bull.
Right.
For the first year, I was with a small company and a small team and just sort of testing it out.
Right.
Okay, 5 years is alright, but you're just going to skip over, your entire process of getting over there? I'd be happy to tell my story, how I got to where I am today, but if you're successful, you have some sort of public presence. And local newspapers are going to write about you and cover all the glitz and glamour. But I just can't find any of it. Where did this guy come from? And where did he even get all this money? Successful business owners are always more than happy to tell their story and not just skip over everything. And by the way, completely forget how they got all the money they have. I'll write that interview off as kind of off the record. But how did he get his money anyway? Maybe his old Uncle Fester had a stroke back in Schittsburg and left behind an estate. Perhaps he ran some shady investment security organization and skipped town with the earnings and changed his name. Maybe a bag of money was sitting on his front porch one morning. I don't know. All we know is that he has some serious cash. Enough to start his own Burger King franchise, owning an unknown amount of restaurants. I mean, where's the IRS? Where's an audit for this guy? Here's where I get even more suspicious. I am not an expert on finances or the NASCAR Garage Society. Now, to even becoming involved in NASCAR requires some form of nepotism, to put it bluntly. What is even more complicated is starting a team, let alone one at NASCAR's highest level, the Cup Series. Usually you must be somewhat well known for someone willing to hand you the keys to their old shop. Your name might have to be, Michael Jordan, Pitbull, Floyd Mayweather. You have to be recognizable, and from what I know, he probably knew someone prevalent enough to get him garage access, came in and waved his big bills around, and found someone willing to give him his team. I guess you could say go big or go home. It would make more sense to me business-wise if you started a Truck Series team or Xfinity Series team, but he wanted to get out there quickly onto the big stage. I could understand that, but to me, this still doesn't make sense. Sadly, my suspicions do not end here. Devine's co-founder came in the form of Wayne Press. I know far less about him except that he was a tomato farmer. He had to, at some point, pitch in and fund this little project of Devine's. And so, in 2012, Devine and Press purchased the old Red Bull Racing shops in Charlotte, North Carolina, for about $10 million. Devine set his sights on making his debut at the Daytona 500, which, mind you, was in 3 weeks. And so began what we know as the saga of BK Racing. Aside from these suspicions, BK Racing entered the NASCAR Cup Series like any other typical startup. While I can go on and on about starter parking, it is essentially just starting the race, running some laps, and backing out after a predetermined distance to earn the sponsorship money. Start and parking is a relic of the past in NASCAR, as rule changes have eliminated its possibility, but BKR oddly opted not to go this route. In their inaugural 2012 season, BK Racing ran 2 Toyota Camrys, the 83 by Landon Castle, which ran full-time, and David Rudiman ran the 93 at the Daytona 500 and Southern 500 at Darlington, while Travis Kroppel completed the remaining races. Now, re-enter Burger King. Before the 2012 season, BKR and the Burger King Corporation reached a licensing agreement that allowed Ron Devine as a franchisee to put the Burger King logo on his car when there was no outside sponsor. But this did not mean Burger King Corp was sponsoring their car. They were just allowed to put the logo on the vehicle. Weird. There was no financial incentive to field either of these 2 cars. You might as well paint them white and send them on their way. But Devine and Press opted to make them look visually pleasing. This is, once again, one of the many instances of Devine making a strange financial decision. Despite this glaring irregularity, BKR rattled off a few top 20 finishes and a top 10 finish in 2012 at the Fall Talladega race with Travis Kroppel in the 93 after he weaved his way through the infamous final lap carnage. Despite this, he still finished 34th in the final standings. Landon Castle in the 83 piled on some top 20 finishes and 31st in the final places, but entering the 2013 season, he would be out of the ride due to contract disagreements with BKR. Here is where it once again gets suspicious. In March 2013, Castle entered a legal proceeding against his former employers while driving for Circle Sport Racing. According to a 2013 Bleacher Report article, a performance-based clause in his contract stipulated that he would receive $500,000, a pretty stipend. However, according to Castle and Bob Pockrass, he received less than half of that. His lawyer stated that the team intentionally deceived Castle in order to ruin Castle's chances of finding an open position as a driver on another race team in the 2013 season. On the outside looking in, it sounds like Devine and BKR were childishly spending money they did not have, and not even paying their drivers at that. And that sounds really bad. Something like this could seriously hurt the team if they didn't do something about it quickly. And well, this could make a video in itself, but Castle has struggled to land a stable ride ever since. It is sad because Castle is a talented, likable driver, but sadly fell victim to what I believe now is a fraudulent NASCAR operation. And so on, the saga continued as if nothing happened. 2013 was business as usual, rattling off dismal results. The only money coming on board was, well, none. Any driver that could muster a sponsor of their own would pocket their well-earned cash, and BKR would get nothing. How is this happening? Enter Union Bank and Trust, a Nebraska bank that was just dumb enough to give their money to Ron Devine. 2014 came and went with even more horrible results. Alex Bowman and many others ran select races, finishing poorly every time. Their in-house engine program was just as horrific. But 2015 saw the lights beginning to flash in the eyes of Ron Devine. In 2015, NASCAR introduced the charter system. The charter system, as basic as possible, is just a way for teams to buy a guaranteed position to race. For each car you have, you must purchase a charter. This inevitably drove up the cost of fielding a Cup Series team, and Devine and Press saw themselves fielding what was now a 3-car operation. And so, BKR likely pleaded to Union Bank and Trust for more money, and this continued up until the bitter end. In 2016, BKR purchased the smoldering remains of Michael Waltrip Racing. Devine inherited nothing more than dumpster fire from a team that had been hit with the NASCAR death penalty due to Spingate, but got some much-needed former MWR employees. But this wouldn't help, not with the feverish spending of BK Racing. At this point, BKR was just as good as gone. It had seemed as if nothing ever went to plan, or this was just American greed or crime at its finest. 2016 was more similar, but a stark difference set this one apart from the others. Just about every driver in the history of BK Racing up until this point had been nothing more than an afterthought. Alex Bowman came and went, amassing nothing more than a 32.6 average finish in all 36 races. Surely nobody could do better? Nobody that had come to BK Racing was committed in the long term and wanted what was best, right there at the moment. BKR was such a dumpster fire as most drivers didn't last a year until they realized the delusion on the management level. But what if I told you there was a driver that cared? And that driver was Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto's entire career is a video in itself, but his time at BK Racing conceived of results so unimaginably good it still has me at a loss for words. Before this shocking result, BK Racing's best finish up until that point was an 8th at Talladega. To cause that astonishing result required nearly half the field to be taken out, but this finish was so improbable. The BK Racing team in early 2016 was nothing short of a dumpster fire. But it was business as usual for the BK Racing 83 Toyota for the April weekend heading into Bristol, Tennessee for the Food City 500. DiBenedetto qualified 30th out of the 40-car field. With some well-timed cautions and some genius tire strategy by the crew chief Dean Need, DiBenedetto finished in excellent 6th place. What makes this so incredible is that not only did it happen with a driver from a team with powder keg finances, but the fact it happened at Bristol. Bristol is a track that requires speed, skill, excellent strategy, survival, and luck. BK Racing had perhaps one of those 4 necessities. You could tell how huge a result this was, as it visibly shocked DiBenedetto at where this luck had suddenly came from after so many years of busted sheet metal and last place finishes for the team. The 30th place average finish for DiBenedetto in 2016 would be the best season of BK Racing's entire existence. DiBenedetto would wisely leave BKR heading into the 2017 season. 2017 would see many different drivers, new paychecks, and disastrous results for the BK Racing team. 2018 would be the time BK Racing finally met its demise. In February 2018, Ron Devine declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy 3 days before the Daytona 500. Devine was stripped of team ownership and went into a trustee's hands. From there, the overzealous operation crumbled into thin air. Remember Union Bank and Trust? It turns out that Ron Devine quickly discovered when you borrow money from the bank, they expect you to pay it back, or they will take everything you have. In August 2018, after BK Racing was barely clinging on financially, all of its assets were liquidated into more successful operations or given to the bank. BK Racing was no more. Once an ambitious dream of Ron Devine and Wayne Press had come crashing down horrifically. In December 2022, Ron Devine would be forced to pay upwards of $31 million in bankruptcy proceedings. Should he have any money to spare, which he likely doesn't, it goes straight to the IRS and former BKR employees who probably never got paid. This is the sad reality of a failing team, but this one is far different from the others. What went so wrong? How did it last so long? We may never know. Just look at their shop in this video. This looks like something you would see out of today's Trackhouse Racing. You could say the shop was only as good as the people running it. We will never know who Ron Devine is. From what I have read, it sounds like he was untouchable from the ground level of the organization, but I feel like my suspicions of criminal activity are sound. Perhaps this could all be a huge misunderstanding. Maybe Ron Devine just sucks at running a business, particularly a team competing at NASCAR's highest level. Perhaps he had no part in it and just hired people that ran his business into the ground. All I know is this: successful people do not declare bankruptcy. BK Racing was far from successful as it could have possibly been. In the end, BK Racing was just another one of those teams doomed from the start, excellently exemplifying how money in NASCAR is paramount, and it will quickly root out any naysayers. I hope you've enjoyed this video. To clarify, these are just suspicions of mine. At times I've watched too much TV, but most of this just does not sit right with me. Now I would like to pass it on to you. What do you think of BK Racing? Who were these guys? That said, this has been another video by the Wheelspin Report. Catch you next time.